founder at Visa Franchise Embedded Biz. We have a special guest to bring on today, Dan Durney, who is the director of franchise development at Assisting Hands Home Care. Dan, thanks for joining today.
Thanks. It's a pleasure joining with you today, Patrick.
And for those that have listened to our YouTube channel, whether on Visa Franchise or our sister company, we're not shy in sharing that we really do like your space, the home care space, home care franchises, especially Assisting Hands. I've been really impressed by the franchisees that I've interviewed, as well as from yourself, as well as other senior management team. But today's kind of going to focus on why Assisting Hands is a good choice for certain E2 visa investors and certain profiles. It's not a one size fits all with franchising, and that's definitely a big value add that we present at Visa Franchise. But maybe Dan, we could just start with what is home care? What would someone be doing as a home care franchisee?
Well, thank you for asking that question. Sounds like a Senate confirmation hearing. um, Senior care really is a heartfelt business, and interestingly, none of our franchisees have ever owned or operated a home care agency prior to joining Assisting Hands. We have 5 nurses and 2 social workers. That's the closest we get. But we have people from food, from high tech, from accounting, consulting, insurance, even a couple of attorneys are in the group. But they all have a common thing with one another, and that is that they have all had some either like a parent or a grandparent or some loved one that they've either provided care directly for, or in a couple cases currently providing care for, or they've vicariously interacted with caregivers and see the impact that a caregiver has on not just the client themselves that they care for, but the entire family. So a franchisee is basically involved in providing care for a very vulnerable population, not directly themselves, but by recruiting and hiring and training quality caregivers, someone that you would send in to your own mom or dad. That's a kind of a baseline hiring premise. And you're also networking in the community to bring awareness of Assisting Hands to what we refer to as referral partners, case managers, doctors' offices, discharge planners, etc. So there's a lot of networking in the community, involvement with senior expos and different organizations that are senior focused, ALS Foundation, Alzheimer's, etc. And then so those are the 2 main things: internal ops and HR with the caregivers and scheduling them with the clients, and then marketing.
And then on the marketing front, like what percent of the sales are from those referral sources versus like paid ads, organic search, or other
Well,
sources?
at the beginning, the 2 primary sources are paid ads and referral networks. And then as you start to build your SEO presence, then you're starting to get more from social media and from Google search ads and things like that, in which we help the franchisee with all of those functions. In fact, we do the website for the franchisee as well as all the social media posts and all the content creation.
And how about like opening up? What kind of support do you provide? Quite recently, I got inquiry from a E2 Visa investor, invested in another home care franchise, was the first one ever to do it, and
Mm.
wasn't really getting much support in terms of the opening, initial insurance, and all that. I'd love to hear from you, Dan. Like, what support do you guys offer for opening up that Assisting Hands, and maybe talk a little bit about your model where you have local support through the area development model.
Right. So first off, we have a program called the BYOC, Before You Open Checklist. And our president CEO loves acronyms. We have a lot of very fun acronyms. Our annual convention is called FEAR, Franchise Education Adventure Retreat. So, but the BYOC is a about 100-step checklist of items that need to happen before someone opens. And so there's weekly phone calls scheduled. There's tasks, submitting the application to the state if applicable, getting your office set up, getting your business license. And so there's a whole playbook basically of steps to do before you open. And then you're supported by someone from the national support team that is assigned once the franchise is granted. And then if you're in an area where we have an area rep, and we have 23 area reps who provide additional localized support to take the new franchisee through that onboarding process to get open. Included in that is about 30 days before the license goes live in that state, the franchisee will go to Miami for a week of new owner training specifically. And then when they come back to their office, then the vendor training for the software happens, and then a full marketing launch program with our marketing director and team work with them. So there's a lot of hand holding, a lot of activity during the onboarding process.
Well, for our new client and future clients that come to Miami for that training, I'd love to just be a fly on the wall and see, for a few hours how that process is. As you know, we're in Miami Beach, so it's good to see that firsthand.
Yeah, it's pretty comprehensive. Everything's covered about how to do marketing, how to hire, what to look for caregivers, for staff members. All the policies, procedures are all created. Everything's just locked and loaded and ready to go. If you're an entrepreneur, but you can follow a system and you're coachable, that's an ideal person for us. In addition to the fact of having a heart for this business. As I like to say, with all due respect to Cold Stone Creamery, this ain't chopping ice cream. This is caring for mom and dad. So having a heart for the business and having people management skills. That's why, for example, some of the people come from the food industry where they've managed people, make great franchisees because they know how to work with people. This is a very people intensive
What's the average
business.
headcount for a franchisee?
It depends on how big they're scaling. Our top franchisee did almost 10 million, just missed it in 2022, and has over 200 caregivers. But the staff at the beginning is 3 people, one of which would include the franchisee and then 2 other people, because it's office based. We're owner operator, we're office based, and the caregivers are all employees. But the states typically require office hours. So if someone is out doing a home assessment or an intake for a new client, you have to have someone that's still in the office. So you can't do here's 2 things that don't work in this business. One is trying to do it part-time while you keep a full-time job, which usually is not applicable for E2. And then number 2 is one person trying to do everything. So you got to properly
And
staff it.
how much time are we talking about it to open the business? I know
Depends
it
on the
varies,
state.
but
It depends on
just
the state. Yeah. Some states take 10 months to a year.
how about like Texas or Florida, where a lot of our clients are moving?
Florida is 3 to 6 months. Texas is about 90 to 120 days.
Okay. So the 3 to 6 months is faster than I've heard from people that have gone independent to open up, as well as some of your other peers in the home care space.
Interesting comment about the independent. I've heard recently, although I can't cite the source, that the success rate for getting your own license, doing it yourself in Florida, is about 20%. We're at 100% licensing.
Do you think that's because like Medicaid fraud and just all the fraud that happens in Florida, or
I don't know if I can tell you that's why there's a lot of regulation in Florida, is because of that. But the success rate has to do with Florida is has a lot
stringent?
of regulation, very regulated. And so you got to know what you're doing to present your application in the format that the state will accept it. And that's not an easy thing to do, but we've been doing it. We've been there the whole time we've been in existence. Our first franchisee was in Florida back in 2006 or 7, excuse me.
And what makes Assisting Hands stand out for E2 visa entrepreneurs?
I think it's a type of business where people can feel fulfilled. It's not just selling a widget. And that's
Yeah.
mostly what we hear from candidates, is they've been doing something either in corporate America or even sometimes um, in a role that they just didn't feel fulfilled personally. It's also a great business to do as a family. And that's a common thread that we hear from E2 visa candidates, that they want to do something together as a family. And we have tons of couples that do it together. We have a mother-daughter team, a father-daughter team, twin brothers in Florida. We have sisters up in the Illinois area. So, but lots of family do the business together. And
Do you,
in many cases, one starts it while the other sometimes keeps a full-time job if they're doing that route. until they can join. But we do have some scenarios where both have jumped in right from the get-go.
And you see it's kind of divide and conquer, where one's focus on the sales and referral networks and the other
Yes,
one's focus more on management.
totally.
And could you share any recent success stories of E2 Visa franchisees with this Assisting Hands network?
We have one in the Dallas, Texas market, came to us from Germany during COVID. So it took a few months, a little bit longer to get all of that worked out. But he came here, he wanted freedom for his family, and he's doing very well. His name is Wolfgang Willems.
And what do you think is some keys to success to adapting to the U.S. Style of doing work and being and basically opening, but also getting to cash flow positive for these E2 visa folks?
Well, the work ethic is usually not a question when it comes to
Right.
E2 visa folks. I've always been very inspired by that. And so in the particular situation in Dallas is we have a very good area rep there who was very hands-on in supporting that franchisee in addition to the national support team, getting them up and running and ongoing marketing events. And so when you have that extra level of support that an area rep provides, it makes it all that much easier.
And you mentioned a lot of different profiles of candidates that, I should say, franchisees, where healthcare is definitely not a requirement. And I think you mentioned 5 that do have healthcare or pseudo healthcare background.
Right.
What's more important, or is it equal? Like the people management or the sales skills of running this type of
Pe-
business?
People management. We're not looking for slick salespeople. Many of our franchisees who manage the internal ops department of the agency will hire a marketing person that maybe has connections in the community. Um, they may be a nurse or a part-time nurse. In some states require that you have a nurse anyway, and so you can leverage that person in addition, especially when you're first starting out. They may be doing some home assessments, but they could also be doing some marketing. So the personality of the person doing the marketing is key. And not everybody's got a sales and marketing and networking kind of personality, but they have key skills in people management. So we have examples of both where a franchisee is doing the marketing and they've hired the office management, and then the reverse as well.
And in terms of like scaling up the operations, you mentioned your franchisee with 200 units. I interviewed a while back. One of your franchisees has 150, or sorry, 150 employees, and the other one 200 employees.
Mhm.
What's like the first year or two look like for someone that's really working hard and looking to grow their Assisting Hands
So in
franchise?
senior care, it really depends on the type of cases that you have. And one of our big differentiators is our flexibility. We don't micromanage our franchisees' business. The core business for Assisting Hands is in-home, non-medical, targeted to seniors. But if you want to offer care for people on say, a short-term case that's maybe a hip or a knee replacement, a post-op rehab, without whether they're a senior or not, you can do that. We have franchisees that have clients that are women at high-risk pregnancies where they're on bed rest for a couple months before they give birth or a little afterward. None of them are seniors. Um, we have some that work with special needs like Alzheimer's and dementia and even autism. And some franchisees have developmentally disabled adult clients as well. So that flexibility in the type of client that you want to care for is totally up to the franchisee. You're also going to have cases where, let's say you have a client who is living with their adult children, but you're providing some respite care, meaning you're giving a break to the caregiver. So maybe that's 4 hours a day, maybe 3 days a week to allow the family members that are providing care to get out and get away for a dinner, a night out, or things like that, or a weekend. And those cases tend to expand as the family gets more comfortable and the client with someone else in their home, all the way to the other extreme where you could have 24/7 round the clock care, which may take 4 caregivers. So there's not a real direct ratio of how many employees because it depends on the type of cases. But if I had to say an average across the system, I would say 2 caregivers per client would be a fair average, but that will vary based on the type of clients that a franchisee is caring for. And by the way, that flexibility also extends into the payor sources that we accept. The bulk of this business is private pay. Um, but we have franchisees that work with veterans that have access to VA benefits, Medicaid in some states, and long-term care and disability insurance clients.
And are those type of clients ones you'd recommend for a new franchisee to go after, or someone that's been in business for longer?
That's a great question. We encourage building a blend right out of the gate. The bulk of the business, again, is going to be private pay, but we have a vendor that helps the franchisee get secure a VA contract and manage those billings, et cetera. So, I mean, you could start networking with the New York Life agents that have clients that have long-term care and disability insurance policies and things like that. So there's lots of different options. It's very market dependent, and kind of also comes a little bit with what their comfort level is for networking. Actually, here's a really good lead source: mortgage brokers that do reverse mortgages.
Huh. Yeah, they're
It's a
usually
good lead
maybe
source for
doing it for someone
clients.
that's older, and they're freeing up capital to pay for their expenses.
hmm and all the things that we do, by the way, marketing related that I've mentioned for client acquisition, we also do for caregiver recruiting, which we're probably going to talk about, but as the biggest challenge. But we've produced videos and social media. We have all the job descriptions ready to go, and all the policies, procedures, everything. It's locked and loaded.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that's always a worry that someone's coming into the
Mhm.
United States. Maybe they've been living here on another visa and they've already been working, but a lot of our clients were successful entrepreneurs in their home country, and they're moving here to open up a new franchise. And a lot of the worries is like, well, how am I going to find the hiring? It seems like, it's so expensive in the US. Like, I guess, how does Assisting Hands help with that aspect of recruiting and training the caregivers?
So first off, we have a full Assisting Hands University for training, so that when the franchisee goes to new owner training in Miami, they are exposed to the methodology for hiring, how to interview. Now, Assisting Hands doesn't do the interviewing or hiring or have anything to do with that. That's a labor relations nightmare there. Um, but we train the caregivers what to look for. Excuse me, train the franchisees what to look for in caregivers, how to interview, provide the training, and then we have an Assisting Hands University training that every caregiver goes through, whether they've been a caregiver for 20 years or they're brand new. We have over 65 videos, I believe, that are training different aspects of the job. We have online learning with skills testing and things like that. So a lot of support for the franchisee to train and guide the caregivers. On the recruiting side, as I mentioned, we do a lot of the marketing on social media and and the other websites for hiring and recruiting caregivers.
How do the general economics work for this business? Imagine some appeal is that the caregiver is essentially part of cost of goods sold, where
Correct.
unless you're getting a senior, unless you're getting someone that needs assisting hand service, you're not paying the caregiver. But is it kind of a spread where, for example, you pay the caregiver $20 and you charge the senior $30, or how does it work in practice?
It's rough. There's a really good website, by the way. I don't know if you've ever shared this with on any other podcast, but it's called homecarepulse.com.
Okay,
And
thanks for sharing that. We'll
they're
include
an
it in the notes.
industry. It's not our website. We're a subscriber to it, and they survey home care companies, and then they regionalize and aggregate the data, or the other way around, aggregate and regionalize the data. But you would learn from that the gross margins are roughly 40 to 50%. You try to approximately double what you pay a caregiver. And some of that is affected by the number of hours per week. So you might give a reduction in hours in the charge per hour if you've got more hours per week. But it's all totally left up to the franchisee. But that's roughly the gross margins is about 40 to
Okay.
50%.
So it is kind of akin to like a barber shop, but I guess the issue with like a barber shop that has a physical location is a much higher initial capital investment, and it usually caps at a certain level, 400K in sales, and then you have to do a whole other investment where
Oh yeah,
Assisting Hands
this is a very
tell
scalable business from
yeah,
you
tell
can
me
run
about
quite
the
a bit of.
initial costs and the ongoing costs, Dan.
So our FDD discloses the investment range from 88 to 160. I always tell people just budget for the 160. That way you've got extra money left over. Um, and our franchise fee is 55,000, and all of the senior care are pretty much in the same range. Our royalty is only 5%, so we're kind of on the lower end a little bit in franchising in general. And we have a fairly unique step down to as low as 4%. So as your revenue increases and hits certain breakpoints, it actually drops it down to 4.5% and then 4%. And then the big differentiator is our national ad fund is only 1/2 of 1%, 0.5.
Hmm.
We used to be 1%. We cut it in half. Most companies are 2 or 3% or
You're
more.
going the other direction. I know the biggest home care franchise increased their rates 50%, and
Yeah,
their franchisees were not happy about that.
yeah. We firmly believe that the best use of the marketing money that a franchisee spends is not padding a marketing fund for a franchisor, but rather spending that money in the local market,
Hyper
doing the networking.
localized.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I imagine for these E2 visa investors, it's a great business. And I've heard this. It's a great business to be because like it's very well respected in the community.
definitely.
Where your kids are going to school, you're meeting people, and it's like, yeah, this is what I do, or this is what me and my wife do, and it,
Hmm.
suddenly, it's something that's kind of elevates your status, and as well as you could be getting referrals just going about your life.
Yeah, nobody's going to come up to you and say, "Why the heck are you doing something like that for?" Everybody recognizes the need, and the oft quoted, 10,000 people a day turn 65 in the U.S. For grins, I put that into a spreadsheet. It's like every 8.64 seconds, which is just mind blowing.
That's
There's
wild. So
there's
yeah,
another
huge
one.
captive market, and it should be easier to integrate in your local community.
Yeah.
Um, I guess we'll close it off before we go into some of the questions that we have from our audience, Dan. But
Mhm.
any key advice for those considering Assisting Hands franchise via their E2 visa?
I would say let's engage the conversation to really find out if this is the type of business that you want to do. It's a very 24/7 type of business. As I like to say, if you're looking to do something part-time from home with no employees, it's the wrong fit. And not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just not the good fit for us. They have to be really just have that heart for the business and be ready to work hard. It's a 24/7 type business. Now, having said that, as you hire the right people in your staff to help take the after hours phone call or take the weekend phone that the office rolls over to, that'll be some of the best investment money you can make to give yourself that break, and you have confidence that your staff is going to take good care of the business. But it's definitely a roll up the sleeves kind of business.
Well, I think most businesses are like that. It's just a lot of times people selling franchises are not giving the full story. And
Yeah, I would
I
agree
don't
with
know
that.
many entrepreneurs that didn't work 50 to 60-hour weeks for the first 18 to 24 months. Like if you're not ready to work 40 plus hours a week,
Yeah.
probably better not to run your own business,
Or at least not this type of business. You
or
can
at
do
least not
something
this type
that's
of
super passive.
business. Vending machines
I
or
was I
something.
was going to let you say it.
Yeah, no, I mean, nothing comes easy. US is hyper competitive, but for those that are willing to work in the right industry, really the sky's the limit. And Assisting Hands has kind of proven that point with some of their franchisees doing incredibly well based off a relatively small initial investment.
Relatively speaking, it is. I mean, compared to some of the investments that you have to have for a EB5, which is I think over 750 now. Is that right?
Yeah, now it's 800K investment, and it Assisting Hands could actually work for the EB5 if you were to show how you're gonna spend the 800K, and maybe you buy the
Wow.
office and you buy the condo office and the
Oh,
first couple
interesting.
years of, the working capital. So, someone looking at doing the E2 to EB5 or potentially someone from India, Assisting Hands could definitely be structured to get the EB5 visa.
I had not
It's
thought
just gonna
about that
take
because I don't they have to have like 10 employees right
10
from
em
the get
10
go.
employees, after 2 years. So
Oh,
I'm
after two.
I would hope a franchisee
Yeah,
gets to at
yeah.
least 10 employees. Um, so there
Oh, I
it
wanted to
could definitely
mention one.
could go
I'm
on,
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it could definitely work for the EB5 visa. It's just not as
Mhm.
straightforward as the E2 where
Right.
it's a lower investment threshold as well as We have a Daniel Abbott asking, in your experience, minimum investment for Brazilians is 100,000 too. How long is the current application time? So there's no E2 visa for Brazilians. At Visa Franchise, we've helped about 100 Brazilians with dual nationals, like Italian passport holders, Spanish passport holders, one Croatian passport holder, get the E2 visa, but not utilizing their Brazilian passport. But we have worked with Brazilians that have companies in Brazil that open a US affiliate, and that US affiliate could be an assisting hands, even though you own gas stations in Brazil. And with that, you could effectively transfer yourself as the executive, get the L1 visa that leads to a green card through the EB1C. So, although today's focus has been on the E2 visa, Assisting Hands does check the boxes to a lot of different visa categories, whether it's the L1, EB1C, EB5, EB2 NIW. It just
Wow.
has to be structured correctly and work with your own independent immigration attorney and with us on the business plan to properly present your case.
Wow, you're definitely the expert on that. Two things I wanted to mention. Uh, the office is not required to be a huge office. We're talking 700 to 900 square feet. You just need to have a room with a door that closes for confidential interviews with the caregivers and a small conference room for training. So I just wanted to clarify that it's not a big expense on the office side. Also, Rich Eberflus, who is one of our area representatives in Chicago, corrected me. I forgot we just signed another E2 visa. He hasn't opened yet. And I was
Yeah, our
thinking of
client
open
from
one.
Visa Franchise. We're very excited to have him
Yeah,
open in Chicago.
Gaurav Singh in Chicago. So that's the second one.
And then we
Thank you,
have
Rich.
a question from Riley. Hi, for E2 visa seekers new to franchising, what mentorship programs and assistance does Assisting Hands offer?
So we actually have a mentoring program within Assisting Hands. We have three levels of support. The first is the national support team. The second, in certain markets, as I mentioned, we have an area rep that provides an extra level of support. And then we have a built-in one called the FOFO, the Family of Franchise Owners, that the franchisees just help support one another. But we do have some mentoring programs where franchisees who have been around a while can help mentor some of the newer ones as well.
And then a question from David. What languages does the franchise handle and what locations are you looking to open franchises?
What languages does a franchise handle? Is maybe he can clarify what he means by that.
I
Everything's in
imagine
English right now.
there are some franchisors where, you know, if you're just serving the Latino market, you could have like intermediate English and speak fluent Spanish. And I
Oh,
know
we
you
do.
speak
Oh,
French, but what are the language requirements and what are the language requirements for Assisting Hands in terms of English fluency, as well as what languages does your team speak or that franchisees can validate with the prospective candidate?
well, we definitely have a number of Spanish-speaking franchisees. We have a strong presence in the Florida market with materials that have been produced in Spanish as well, so we can support that right now. I speak French fluently, but I'm not in a position to help with operations in French. Um, and he asked a second question about what locations we're looking to open franchises. So, of course, Rich said Chicago, the area rep in Chicago that's on the webinar here. Um, but I would say the markets where we have area reps would be the top markets because of that extra level of support. So that includes Chicago. We have 3 area reps in different parts of Florida, 3 in Texas, all the major markets, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Austin. Um, we have a new area rep in Tennessee, in the Nashville market, um, Boston, New England area, Connecticut. I'm going to leave somebody out. They're going to get mad. Utah, uh, Northern California in the San Jose market, Orange County, California,
All nice
Indiana.
places to live.
Yeah, Indianapolis. In fact, our top franchisee is the area rep for Northern Indiana and Indianapolis area. Um, yeah, someone's
And how
gonna
do you
get mad
see
that I
like
found.
living in a city like operating in Miami Assisting Hands versus like a smaller city in Florida, for example? like a Fort
So
Myers? What makes the most sense? Are the revenues kind of expected to be the same? Because costs are going to be a lot less, I'd imagine operating in Fort Myers.
so our territories are approximately 225,000 in total population, but we make sure there's a minimum of 25,000 seniors over 65. So it's really the senior base, and it doesn't take that many clients in this business in general. I mean, 50 clients, you could have $1 million business, because again, depending on the mix of how many hours, but the key metrics are billable hours per week is the key metric, and what depending on what your billable rate is for your break even and your expenses. So in some states where the licensure is more regulated, and if someone's coming in without industry experience, and let's say in Florida they have to have an administrator who has uh, healthcare experience with supervisory experience as well, now they're going to have to pay a little more to hire that person to be the administrator until the franchisee has been in the business long enough to where they can be their own admin. So a lot of it is not so much regulated on uh, economics from the cost of living, although that certainly factors in, but also the economics of what it takes to get licensed in the states. Oh, and I was going to mention Maryland, Northern Maryland, Virginia, or Maryland and Northern Virginia is another um, area that we're looking to go into. And of course, North Carolina Raleigh market is
And
a
then
strong.
are you only open, I guess, for those that are opening up new franchises? Are there any opportunities with resales, or are resales kind of out of the price for a lot of these E2 visa investors?
It kind of depends on the where they're at. We don't have a lot of resales. Occasionally, we get them for reasons like a health reason that they're getting out,
Sure.
or they've been in 10, 15 years and they're ready to retire. So we don't have a lot of resales. But um, what was the first part of that question?
I mean, I guess I would imagine it'd be a lot more than the 80 to 160K.
Oh, oh, definitely. I mean, we've seen franchises sell for 2 million plus if they're, depends on what they're bringing in.
So yeah, that's I mean, it's definitely a positive metric if you're looking to start an assisting hands or another home care franchise, that people sell these businesses for substantially more than they invest, compared to like a Subway where
Right.
the midpoint investment's 350 and they resell for like 200. Like you're
Yeah,
not going to make your money back, and it's a metric that we track at our sister company Vetted Biz.
right. And I've seen some of that information. Yeah, this is a recurring revenue type of business, and in general, any kind of business where you have employees and recurring revenue typically resales for a higher multiple than other kinds of businesses where it's the person has basically bought a job and the whole business revolves around them only.
Dan, we've gone through a lot today. Are there any pending items that you would like to share with our audience?
I would just say that we are very selective about who we bring in. We only add about a dozen franchisees a year on purpose, and we are proudly not owned by private equity.
That's a big selling point. I like you can see the vibe and the core values and just kind of the corporate culture, talking to executives like yourself at the franchisor level as well as the franchisees.
Yeah, I mean, we're over $100 million company, so we're prime pickings for that. But the culture with the family culture of assisting hands is very unique. And I brought a little prop to share that with you. Our discovery day is pretty unique, and we have a 5-step process where we have go through an initial call, then we go through the disclosure. Third step was we have an operations call to go through the state-specific licensure requirements so that the franchisee has a clear idea of what it's going to cost to open in their state. Then the fourth step is validations, where you have opportunity to talk with franchisees, you talk to anybody in our system. Um, and our franchisees will talk your ear off because they love talking about assisting hands. And then the fifth is our discovery day, and ours is very unique. And you're familiar with this. We have we have ours in person. We don't do virtual, so they're in person. They're in Boise, Idaho.
Good.
May involve riding a horse.
Who doesn't like that?
This doesn't fit very well with a headset.
I've
Our
seen some of the photos. I'd love to see some of
Yes.
the videos of the ranching exercises on horseback.
So our president CEO has hosts a dinner at their home with his family the night before Discovery Day, and then weather permitting, we saddle up and ride around the property and watch a roping demonstration. They have a son who's a world-ranked roper and steer wrestler, but it's a very fun bonding thing that we do that's just crucial to our relationships that we build with our franchisees. And also to that comment, we've never had any litigation or, in our FDD.
And it's been
Eh,
how many years franchising?
17 years. We're at the
17
17th
years, over
year.
100 units. That's impressive.
It's unheard of in franchising. Someone
Yeah.
statistically should have sued somebody by now, but
Something.
just statistically. But we've had franchisees that closed doors for extenuating circumstances. Sometimes they just couldn't follow the system, et cetera. But we've definitely always parted ways
Amicably.
amicably. Yeah,
How it should be at the end of the day.
how it should be. Yeah.
We've interviewed franchisees where you just hear the most absurd stories, like
Oh,
being
it's
sued for
crazy.
18 years of royalties, and
Oh my
all that
gosh.
stuff kinda comes out eventually, and sadly, there's a lot of bad actors that just are going franchise brand to franchise brand, and
Yeah.
that's a big thing that we continue to strive for at Vetted Biz, is just putting that information out on the open, so
Well, I like your approach, and we're very upfront. We definitely are looking for people who that's a good fit culturally, that can contribute, and they can contribute positively to our FOFO culture to support one another.
what does FOFO stand for again?
Family of franchise owners.
Awesome, I love it. FOFO culture. Well, Dan, thanks again for joining today, and we'll also include links to the interview I did with your president as well as one of the franchisees.
Hmm.
And if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out to Visa Franchise. We can get you connected with Dan and set up a call to see if Assisting Hands might be a good fit for you as you pursue the E2 visa. Dan, thanks again.
Happy to do it. Thanks so much. It was great chatting with you today.